Have you ever woven anything together? Well, Mo Reynolds loves to weave things. She's teaching a virtual workshop on Saturday, April 11th, of weaving folk and fairy tales with your personal narratives. But everyone is wondering, Mo, why are you not wearing red lipstick right now, what you're known for?
I don't know how I'm even talking without red lipstick on. The red lipstick is powerful, Rachel, and it can't be overused. I have to save its potency for the right moment. So it will be there at the workshop, but it's just not here today. I have to use it wisely. It's a
Well,
lot of
it's
power.
just like when you're weaving those stories together, right? You
Exactly.
use it wisely. See, this all connects. Of course it does.
Exactly. It all
And
connects to the lipstick. You have to get the right amount of punch at exactly the right amount of time. So
well, what we want to know is how early were you weaving folk and fairy tales with personal narratives? Like, was it just a year ago, several years ago when you were a little kid? Like, when did this happen?
it happened on the plane to Florida in 2020. It was my first time being a featured storyteller at a festival. I was heading to the Florida Storytelling Festival, and I had a notebook on the plane, and I was trying to decide which stories I wanted to tell. And I had written out this list of different folk tales, different personal narratives. And as I was writing them out and trying to decide what would make everyone fall in love with me as a storyteller, I noticed that some of them had really similar themes. And I thought, I wonder if I could tell this one and this one at the same time because they both deal with change. And so I turned to a new piece of paper on my notebook and I wrote a line, drew a line down the middle, and I outlined the folktale on the left and my personal narrative on the right. And I started doing arrows and circles and lines to see how they could go together. And it just felt like a really cool experiment. And so I gave it a go at the festival. And it became a new kind of work that I love to do and that I've sort of become known for as I've done festivals since.
And that comes to the point that sometimes there's a personal narrative camp and there is a traditional tale camp. And you just kind of threw out those camps and decided to blend them. Did you see other storytellers do this, or did you usually see people do one or the other?
The first time I saw a professional storyteller, when after I realized I hadn't invented the art, was Laura Sims at the Teller in Residence, and she didn't weave it exactly the way I do, but she had these beautiful folk tales, and she would have kind of this personal intro of this is what this story means to me, and then she would tell the folk tale. And I just really loved how she created the connection. It wasn't necessarily the braid approach that I used, but I loved that she couched that universality of a folk or a fairy tale, but she tethered it to her own life. And when I do the braiding, I feel like it creates this really fascinating triangle of the audience and the personal story and the folk and fairy tale can kind of come together because there's a universal approach and appeal to folk and fairy tales, but it lacks sometimes the personal connection because it's not true. And then there's a personal connection because a personal narrative is true, but it lacks the universality because it's about one life. But when you put all of those together, I feel like it just unlocks this new layer of connection. So I hadn't really seen anyone do it the way I do it, but there were definitely some suggestions of it with other storytellers that then I kind of absorbed and as I created my own approach
Well,
and
I believe
continue to create my own.
you you believe that that any traditional tale is personal. Like I think I was hearing that even just now.
Yeah,
Uh, tell me more about how you feel about that.
I think the reasons that old stories last is because they apply to every generation. You know, the ungrateful fisherman could be the ungrateful lawyer or the ungrateful banker or the ungrateful housewife or the ungrateful teacher. The universal themes of humanity are in place in the folk and fairy tales. And so I think through the right lens, they all become personal narratives. It's just sometimes it takes more imagination to unlock that. And children are more natural at that. They're able to see themselves in rocks and streams and fairies and magical worlds more than sometimes adults let themselves. And so that's why if I bring in my own personal narrative, I feel like it almost is this permission slip to adults. See, like you can see yourself in this story as well. and it allows them to maybe unlock their imagination in a different way. Because I feel like all folk and fairy tales, not all of them, some of them are just weird, but a lot they last because they continue to resonate.
They do. And the Saturday of April 11th, 2026, will be this wonderful virtual workshop. There's a time zone converter. If you go to storycrossroads.org/all things story, you can see that link below. And let's delve in. You probably want to be thinking around different things that have happened in your life, as well as some traditional tales that you know ahead of time. And until we tell again.
See you there.